All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. This time we're actually going back to Chapter 4, and we're going to look at early societies in South Asia. In particular, we're going to be looking at what is to become India. In Section 1, we're going to be looking at the Harappans, which is one of two different civilizations we're going to be looking at in India. The other one's going to be the Aryans, which we should remember from Indo-Europe and those Indo-European languages. However, we're not going to talk about those until Section 2. By the way, I should give you a little piece of information that may be relevant to today's lecture. They are currently testing the fire alarm system here at school, and so you may hear some beeping, some buzzing, and some door slamming in the background. My apologies. I'm going to try to minimize that, turn on noise reduction when I go and process this movie, but you might hear some weird noises in the background. So, our essential question is going to be exactly the same as we've been looking at for the last several chapters, because we need to, as we get to the end of Unit 1, examine these societies and figure out what are the similarities and what are the differences and why. So, let's get right into Harappan society. First thing you need to know is we don't actually know all that much about Harappan society. The problem is the area where they settled after 3000 BCE has been mostly covered by water. And so what we have are the archaeological remains that still remain above the waterline, but these are pretty limited. And so, for instance, they had writing, we can't translate it. We don't know much about their political system. We don't know much about their social system because there's no real communication for us to draw from in order to make these interpretations. What we do have is archaeological evidence, which is fairly imprecise. So, what do we know about them? Well, we know that they settled down in the Indus River Valley. Again, not unlike the Mesopotamians, not unlike the Egyptians, not unlike the Chinese. We see a group of people, and the Bantu. How can we forget about the Bantu? We see a group of people settling around a river society. With the Harappans, again, it's around the Indus in subcontinental Asia. We see them doing something similar to the Mesopotamians in what kind of food that what the food they're eating. They start using agriculture. Agriculture seems like, we're beating the dead horse here because agriculture, again, seems to be a hallmark of these early civilizations. They're specifically cultivating wheat and barley, but we also see other domesticated animals such as chickens and cows that are being used by the Harappans. We also see, like the Egyptians, the cultivation of cotton for clothing. So instead of we're using animal skins, we're using plant fibers. So let's keep going. By the way, there's a map of India. There's the Indus River. This is the Ganges River. That's going to become relevant later. Let's keep going. All right. What do we know about the political system? Well, the answer is not a whole lot. We are able to make speculations, to make guesses based on certain assumptions and based on certain pieces of evidence. We see that there is the possibility of the existence of social hierarchy. We see that certain houses contain certain luxuries that others didn't. We see evidence of, first of all, people living in houses where we see evidence of some people not living in houses. We see evidence of ovens and wells belonging to specific houses. And when we see that one group of people has access to certain luxury goods that other groups don't, it tends to speak of a social hierarchy. Think of the idea of something that rich people have, poor people don't have. Let's call it a in-ground pool. How about that? Not everyone has an in-ground pool, and if you have an in-ground pool, it certainly speaks to some degree of that you're higher up in the social hierarchy than someone who doesn't have it. Obviously, it's not a perfect example, but I'm coming up with it off the top of my head. And I have alarms beeping in my ear, so it's a little distracting. So you have to excuse me for my poor analogies. What are some other things that we noticed? Well, we see standardization of unit and measures. Well, we're able to take the American example where the Constitution actually gives the federal government the power to determine weights and measures. And so we're using that as evidence to say, well, maybe there was some sort of strong centralized authority in the Harappan society. And we also see the existence of what we think are public works projects. We're seeing marketplaces and possibly public buildings that speaks to some sort of political organization, perhaps some sort of powerful political organization that had the ability to authorize these things. But again, we're not certain based on, again, the really limited historical record. This takes us to religion. What do these Harappans believe? Well, to the right, we see evidence of something that we've seen before, and that is worship of the fertility goddesses. How do we know that? Well, we're able to look at Harappan artifacts and their art, and we're able to look at Hindu artifacts and art, and we're able to use that to kind of suss out, well, you know, it looks like the Hindus believe in fertility goddesses, and it looks really similar to what the Harappans did. So we're going to use the transitive property to bring geometry into all of this mess to say, well, then, therefore the Harappans must have also believed in these fertility goddesses. Remember, fertility goddesses, it's not Harappan society where we're first seeing the worship of fertility goddesses. And we get into the reasons why they're worshiping fertility goddesses, that having a lot to do with the Neolithic Revolution. Remember, we're still way back in time. All right, let's keep going. A couple more slides left, and by a couple I mean exactly 2. So, what happened to the Harappans? Well, they declined. And why did they decline? We start to see ecological degradation. With civilization comes an impact on the environment, and the Harappans are no exception to that. What we see is substantial deforestation occurring during this time period, and we believe that possibly that deforestation led to some sort of crisis. At the same time, there could have been other natural catastrophes, such as floods or earthquakes, that could have led to the end of the Harappans. But by 1500 BCE, we see the decline of the Harappans to the point where they're no longer in the cities, and it leads to the invasion of the Aryans, who, as we're going to see in the next section, quickly conquer and put the Harappans toward the bottom of the social hierarchy. But that's a conversation for section 2, which we will get to next time. Thanks for watching.